Welcome to Intelligence Gathering and Analysis. I'm Horit, and we are now at Unit 5, which is our final unit. And we want to look at automated monitoring and analysis. Before we go into the tools, it's important to understand or to be reminded that we have an attack surface. And the attack surface is the gateway into the organization. And there are many different things that we have to look at. For example, and we have mentioned this before, open ports. So we have to look at the ports which are open because these ports will allow traffic to enter into the organization. And as we had indicated before, by default, we want to ensure that all the ports are closed and we just open the ports that are absolutely necessary for the applications to work. So looking at our attack surface, there are things that impact the network. There are things that arise out of the software. There are things that we have to contend with from a physical standpoint. And also there are things that we need to look at from a social engineering aspect. For the network security, we mentioned open ports, but then there are also some weak protocols which need to be strengthened or need to be avoided. So that's something that we need to be aware of. In terms of the software that we have on our system, some of these software have loopholes or backdoors which need to be closed. So we have to look at that. In addition, we're not just talking about the applications which are built by the organization. We're also talking about those commercial programs that have certain vulnerabilities within them. And that's why it is very important to get like the software updates or patches, because what the patches do is they address some of these common concerns and attempt to fix them. When it comes to physical security, we know that there are several things that we can use to assist in protecting the organization, but we cannot underestimate the impact of the persons. For example, we might have persons who are working with the organization who are currently disgruntled. They might not have gotten a raise. They might have been treated unfairly. And sometimes these persons are still within the organization. And as such, they can create havoc. In addition, even if they leave the organization, sometimes they still have access. I've known of cases where persons have left organizations, but they're still on the email listing, for example. So any critical thing that is being discussed and is being sent over the email channel, they are still privy to this kind of information. As software personnel, we have to be extremely careful and aware of all of these avenues whereby the network and the organization can be compromised. And we have spoken extensively about social engineering and the impact of persons just observing our behavior, how we act, what we do, and taking advantage of that. Now on to the tools. We have a slew of tools available: Nagios, Elasticstack, Zabbix, Logstash, and OSSEC. And what we're now going to do in the next session is to have a brief overview of each of these tools and what they bring to the table. So we're starting out with Nagios and Zabbix, and the important thing to note here is that they are both open source tools, which mean that they are freely available. And they are essential for monitoring the IT infrastructure and also for providing alerts when things are going wrong. And this is important. Remember, we're talking about automated solutions. So these are tools which are working in the background. They are constantly scanning what is happening within the IT infrastructure. And when it sees things that are going haywire, that are looking a bit abnormal, then we get these system alerts so that as the human beings, as the true intelligence behind all of this, we can now start to dig deeper and see what is happening so that the necessary actions can be taken. Then we'll move on to Elastic Stack. And once again, this is open source and it's useful for collecting data, for storing the data, and for generating effective visualizations so that we can have a better understanding of the relationships that exist between the data that is being collected. We also have Logstash, which once again is also open source. And this is what they call a data processing pipeline. And what that really means is that it provides tools for importing data into this pipeline. And as the data moves through the pipeline, then it is converted, it is transformed. So we have the necessary transformation tools that we can apply to the data as it moves from point A to point B. And also, after it has been transformed, then we might want to drop it into some sort of repository, the transformed data into some sort of repository. And Logstash also provides that. Then we have OSSEC, which is a host-based intrusion detection system. And as the name suggests, it wants to monitor the system to find out what kind of intrusions are being attempted. And it will do its work by looking at all of the files. We spoke about log files in a previous session. So it will analyze these log files. It will look at what is happening in terms of the access levels of the users. And once again, if there is anything that seems abnormal, then this tool can also put out alerts so that we can be informed as to what is going on. Another thing to note is that it is PCI compliant. And when we talk about PCI, we're talking about the payment card industry. So there are certain policies that need to be put in place to ensure that when we're dealing with payments, the payments are held secure, and the OSSEC has indicated that they are compliant in this regards. Finally, network visualization and analysis is very important. And it's important because once we have plotted the network assets so that we can visualize it, easily see it, then it's easy for us to appreciate the kind of relationships that exist between them. As denoted by this diagram here, it is clear for us to see who the actors are and the assets that they have access to. So this is based on graph technology or the graph data set, where we have nodes representing each asset or actor. And we have the edges, which are the lines between the nodes that denote the kind of relationships which are being established. So these kind of tools are essential or very useful in terms of identifying the kind of vulnerabilities that will exist, because we're looking at patterns, we're looking at trends, and also they can assist us in finding out the kind of bottlenecks which exist within the system. And wherever bottlenecks occur, they will know that performance is going to dip. Hence, we would want to address these bottlenecks to screw up the throughput that is being experienced within the network. And this image here just provides a nice diagram of what a graph can look like if it's properly designed. And we can see the use of colors that indicate the different types of relationships that exist between the assets. And finally, just to note that there's an open source tool, Gephi, that you can use to actually build these graphs and visualize what is happening in the network. And this has brought us to the end of Unit 5. So we have now completed all the units from Units 1 to 5, and now the rest is in your hand. Please note that what we have done here is to cover the theoretical aspect, and as you already know, the kind of practical experience that you will need to supplement this course or to round out the course is being provided by your lab technologist. So that's it. Take care and have a good one.